Good morning. In Hebrews chapter 11, which is definitely one of the great chapters in the Word, there are a number of men and women who are listed, and their feats of believing are recorded. As Aisha said, I'm going to share on Joshua this morning. Though he is not specifically listed by name in Hebrews 11, one of the great believing feats that was accomplished through God via Joshua's leadership and with the believing support of the children of Israel was the conquering of Jericho, the city of palm trees, the walls falling down. But I think Joshua is a great example of a man who heard the call of God, and throughout his entire life, he continued to grow in his ability to believe and to walk with God. So the title of this teaching is Joshua Growing in Believing. You can look at Exodus 17, and we'll be in verse 9. Now, if you're familiar with the Old Testament and Israel rising up, getting out of bondage, leaving Egypt, they're in the wilderness, and Moses is the head. He's the leader. But he has the support of other men, such as Joshua. In Exodus 17:9, it reads, "And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose us out men, and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." You know, every individual, when you really get right down to it, and you look at their lives, you see that there are many qualities latent within a person. Not just necessarily one thing, but many things. And the first real recorded statement of Joshua, he was a warrior. He knew how to choose men who had ability to stand and fight for Israel. In Numbers 13, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers 13, it's kind of cool. Verse 16, "Now Moses and God," really, God was ready to take the children of Israel right into the promised land once they left Egypt. So the logical thing was, we better do a little reconnoitering. We better do a little fact-finding. So in verse 16 it reads, "These are the names of the men which Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Jehoshua." That's Joshua. He was one of these men. In Numbers 14, And Joshua the son of Nun, verse 6, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. Why? They came back with a great report. A land flowing with milk and honey, a land ripe for the taking. But others who spied out the land, oh no, there's giants there. Well, they're too great. We can't conquer them. Verse 7, and they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is pardon me, an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Verse 9, only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. This was Joshua's and Caleb's statement. Hey, we can do this thing. So here we have Joshua, a warrior, a spy, and an encourager. You have to, at times, encourage people. Look at Numbers 27. Verse 18. And the Lord said unto Moses, take thee Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom the Spirit is the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him, and set him before pardon me, Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. Here's one of the hallmarks of Joshua's life, a man in whom the Spirit of God is. If we're going to do great exploits for God, it takes the Spirit in operation, energized in our lives. Verse 20, and thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of Urim before the Lord. At his word shall they go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. Joshua was being presented to Israel as a leader. He would be the future leadership of Israel. Verse 23, and he laid his hands upon him and gave him a charge as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses. I think sometimes in life, we often think of ourselves as what we lack, not what we have. We don't see ourselves as God sees us. And even when we do, I think sometimes we run away from what God has made us to be. And yet, one of the stated goals of True North Ministry has been to help people find their true north, their calling, how to recognize it, and how to fulfill that calling. And we all can get pretty discouraged by looking inside. You know, oh, you don't know my secret sins. You don't know how I wrestle in my mind day after day. Instead of seeing ourselves as God sees us. This morning we had manifestation of the gift of Holy Spirit. And in a word of prophecy, God said, grow your own garden so you may have to give of that garden. I think that's pretty cool. We've all been given so much, and do we sit on it, or do we believe to give it? Believe to make it available to other people? Joshua, if you really think about it, he was every day facing new, uncharted territory. Every day. He grew into the leadership responsibility, replacing Moses ultimately. And you have this great goal in front of you. Go in and claim the promised land. It didn't happen overnight. When you really read all the way through Joshua, it took some 35 years to conquer what they conquered. And pardon me, and they didn't even conquer the entire promised land. There was things left undone. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 31. Deuteronomy 31 and verse 23. And he gave Joshua the son of Nun a charge, and said, be strong and of a good courage, for thou shalt bring the children of Israel into the land which I swear unto them, and I will be with thee. That's God's great exhortation to Joshua. Be strong, be courageous. I'll bring you in. I'll do this for you. You know, even in the history of our nation, going back to the Revolutionary War, it wasn't won because George Washington was such a great general. He really wasn't. It wasn't won because the Continental Army was so much better than the British Army. They weren't. When you really look at the history of that period of time with spiritual eyes, you will see that time and time and time again, God interceded, answering prayers on behalf of the army, the leadership, the Congress, and the men and women that hungered for freedom. George Washington, one of the great exhortations given to him by the Congress was, protect your army. Don't lose your army. It's like in football, you know, manage the game. Just manage the game. You're not as good as the other team, but if you'll manage the game, you will be in a position to win. Joshua, his goal was to carry out what God exhorted him to do. Not just manage, but go in and claim and win. Deuteronomy 34. Verse 9. And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands upon him. And the children of Israel hearkened unto him, and he did as the Lord commanded Moses. Growing in believing takes obedience to God. Joshua did what he was commanded to do. He grew. He had the spirit of wisdom, which would show its fruit as the years went by. You know, sometimes you want to be young always. But as you look back at life, you go, I'm thankful I lived that and became understanding of that. I grew in wisdom. What I would do, what I wouldn't do. Sometimes I think for parents, you know, your kids grow up, you know, buy a house, marry, have children, whatever, and you're kind of sitting there on the sidelines and going, boy, I sure wish they'd asked me for some advice, but hey, that's their lives. But at the same time, they often look at their parents and realize, you've been through this. You can help me. And they'll open up and say, Mom, Dad, what do you think about this? give them the word. Help them. Go to the book of Joshua, probably one page. Joshua 1:6. This is God's exhortation continuing in Joshua's life. Be strong and of a good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Second recorded time, God exhorts Joshua, be strong and of a good courage. Maybe we should tell ourselves that every day as we face conquering our promised land. Verse 7, it says, be strong and very courageous. Step it up. Take it up another notch. Verse 8, this book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. So God's saying, hey, you make that word your own. You think about it. You work it in your mind. Observe it and do it all the days of your life. The latter part of that verse, for then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. The great temptation is to think we do it because we're so great and forget about God in the equation. You want to have prosperity and good success? It has to be because of the Word. What we focus on, what we think about, and what we apply. It's the same for all of us. You know, you've enjoyed success, and all of a sudden it's like, where is it? My sales have dropped off. Nobody wants to buy anything. I couldn't give a furnace away. So what happens? You start doubting yourself, looking inside. Maybe I'm in the wrong profession. Maybe I should go work for another company. Wears you down. Maybe the thing to do is look at the Word and get encouraged. Decide what your garden is going to look like. What are you going to plant that you can give to other people? Think about it and do it. That was the exhortation God gave to Joshua. So for some 35 years, Joshua and the children of Israel went from one campaign to the next, conquering, dividing as inheritance this promised land. And that wasn't all they were doing. You read the record, and there were times when Joshua would send a certain portion of his army home. Take care of your wives and your kids. See how the affairs of your tribe are going. We'll stay focused here. You focus over here. Go to Hebrews 11. As I stated, Hebrews 11 lists so many men and women who exemplified believing and growing in their believing. Hebrews 11, verse 4. By believing, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous. The great cry of humanity, I just want to be right. God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead, he speaks. Abel's offering, by believing, illustrated his worship to God. Verse 5. By believing, Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. Enoch demonstrated by believing his walk with God and how God blessed him. Verse 6. But without it is impossible to please God. For he that comes to God must please him. He God must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek. Everybody believes something, right? Our goal is to believe God, to utilize this great law of life, and be a pleasing, wonderful fragrance to God. Verse 7. By believing, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear and prepared an ark to the saving of his house. Believing results in preparation. What do you want? How do you want to get it? What is it going to take to receive the promise you're seeking after? Verse 8. By believing, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. Believing involves obedience, just like Joshua demonstrated. He grew in his believing because he obeyed. God said, here's a charge, do this. Here's a commandment, do this, done. Did he always do it perfectly? No. But when he recognized there was an error, he worked to correct and move on. Verse 11. Through believing, all yourself receive strength to conceive. Believing produces strength. Think about that one. Look at verse 20. It says, by believing, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. One of the great components of believing is it blesses. Others can benefit from our believing. I believe it's in Galatians 5 where it talks about having confidence in your own believing. That's not being puffed up. That's getting to that place where you see, I can believe and get the results. I'm not dependent on, riding somebody else's coattails or living with less than God's best. Have confidence in your ability to believe. And lastly, Hebrews 12. It reads in verse 1, wherefore seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Every day for over 30 years, Joshua had to run his race with believing. He had to set aside whatever weight or sin or failure may have occurred to stay focused on the charge. Go into the land. Go over the Jordan. When he went over the Jordan, it was at flood stage. Not a good time to be fording a river, yet God dried it up, just as he did the Red Sea, so the children of Israel could go over to their goal. So, in summation, think about what you're thinking about. Challenge yourself to look at the Word daily. Make God your priority. Pray more and expect more. Grow in your believing and see how much greater life can be. Thank you, and God bless you.